Hello class, in this last video lecture for this unit, this module and this unit, we're going to talk about group decision making. Now, it could certainly be argued that making decisions in a group is going to provide numerous advantages to the organization, and more than likely you'll come up with a better decision as a result of discussion and debate. However, there are some drawbacks or pitfalls associated with decision making in a group. And if you've ever been involved in a group who's been tasked with making a decision, you could probably recognize or even understand beforehand what some of those issues or problems could be. So in this chapter, we'll look at the advantages of group decision making. We'll talk about how to make group decision making better, how to make group functioning better. And we'll also look at some of those issues and problems that could arise when we have people in a group, especially people with personalities that would kind of maybe overwhelm a conversation. So the advantages of group decision making, and again, these are kind of self-evident, I would think. You have a greater pool of knowledge, right? So in groups, if they say, group size should be somewhere 5 or 7 people, maybe never more than 11 or 13. But within that group, you're going to have a greater pool of knowledge. You're going to have individuals of different backgrounds, different experiences, different educational backgrounds. So all of that contributes then to whatever the decision at hand is. And there's going to be different perspectives. We have different cultures. Again, different backgrounds, different upbringings. That's just going to provide a different way of looking at a problem. Not to mention different decision-making styles within the group, which will help, because we have some people maybe a little more reflective, some people a little more extroverted and talkative to talk through the problem. There'll be intellectual stimulation. We in the last unit we talked about some of the biases that happen, the availability bias and the confirmation bias. Well, if you have somebody kind of checking in on you and questioning maybe your line of reasoning, that could certainly help to make a better decision. Better understanding of the decision rationale, talking through it, looking at all the angles, all the different angles, will help you appreciate the decision and really be able to understand how you arrived at the decision you did. And then deeper commitment to the decision. So instead of one person saying, here's what we're going to do, you have a group of people who came to a consensus and said, okay, here's what we think the best way forward is. So there tends to be a little more commitment into that type of decision. With the advantages also comes disadvantages. Few people dominate or intimidate. If you've ever been in a meeting and you see that one person or those two people who tend to just dominate and dismiss maybe what other people are saying, some people have a tendency in those situations to shut down and not contribute and not talk. So if you have people like that in a group, that could really be detrimental to that kind of collaborative process. You'll have satisficing. We talked about satisficing way back in Module 1, where, all right, maybe this getting together and making this decision is time consuming and it may be wasting my time. I have other things to do. Let's just find the decision that's good enough and move on. You might see that in a jury pool, maybe when the jury is sequestered and goes try to make a decision where it should look like this has been a long trial. We've been here a long time. Let's just all kind of agree on a consensus here and move on. Let's not go too deep. Goal displacement. So again, in meetings, you've probably seen this 1,000 times where things go off track. Other issues are discussed. Other issues arise. So it's important that the group stays on task and stays focused. And then lastly is a concept called groupthink, which is agreeing for the sake of a unanimous decision and thus avoiding accurately assessing the decision situation. So there's a lot of things that go into groupthink, and it's just this unwise consensus about the direction or the decision the group can make based on a whole number of different factors that are kind of present when you have groups. So what are some of the symptoms of groupthink? And why are they around? Why are these decisions? How are these decisions made within this dynamic of groupthink? Well, first of all, there could be a sense of invulnerability, right? So the group gets together. Maybe it's a group of engineers or technical people, and they really feel strongly about their intellectual capacity and their ability, and they just say, look, there's, whatever we say is more than likely true, and we have this kind of sense of us that we're maybe a little too knowledgeable, a little too important to make a wrong decision. So you have this invulnerability air about the group. Rationalization, where you could kind of rationalize away maybe contradictions or something that isn't quite fitting into the narrative that you're trying to kind of talk through. There's an illusion of consensus and peer pressure among people. So maybe I don't want to say anything. Maybe everybody seems like they're in agreement, and I don't want to say anything to kind of throw that off. But maybe everybody kind of feels the same way and just doesn't want to say anything. So there's this kind of illusion that everybody agrees, but maybe not everybody does. And there's the wisdom of the crowds, where again, going back to that, the group thinks it knows a little more than it does. We're as a group here, we're together, and we're all intelligent. So how can we make a poor decision? The classic example of group thief was the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger catastrophe, where an O-ring didn't function because of the cold weather. And there's a lot of reasons why they decided to launch that space shuttle, which eventually exploded in space. And you had a group of engineers together saying, well, we've never done this before, we've never launched in such cold weather before. There could be a problem with these O-ring functioning. But there was a lot of pressure. There was pressure coming from NASA. There was pressure coming from the press. There was pressure coming from Congress because of funding for NASA. So there was a lot of pressure being applied, and as a result, the discussions kind of stopped. There was a lot of rationalization going on. Oh, we've launched before in somewhat similar conditions and nothing happened, and the engineers then kind of thought everybody else was on the same page when maybe they really weren't. And the bottom line was the group agreed to go ahead and launch without raising any more objections, and then one of the biggest tragedies ever happened. So that's definitely that was definitely a very bad example of groupthink, or a bad outcome of what groupthink is. What managers need to know then about groups and decision making. Groups take longer to make decisions. There's more people, they're going to take longer. Their size affects the quality. So optimum group size maybe 5, 7, maybe 9. Odd numbers are the best, so you could really get a majority rules going. The group may be too confident. So it is important to have somebody in the group who is kind of a critic, and just to say, hey, look, I see what you're saying, but let's look at the other side. Or someone to play devil's advocate. And knowledge does count. If you're putting together a group for a certain function, have knowledgeable folks, have knowledgeable individuals in that group to definitely move the decision-making process along. So when can groups help? When it can increase quality, when it can increase acceptance, when it can increase development. So those are the 3 times when practical guidelines for when to form a group. And again, putting together a group to make a decision is not always the right answer. Sometimes individuals can work through those answers. It's going to be quicker. There may be some biases or some information left out, but it's going to be a quick decision. But in times when you need quality, increasing acceptance or increasing development, then groups are definitely better. Some group solving techniques. Consensus occurs when members are able to express their opinions and reach an agreement. So it's important that you allow people to talk and communicate in this group function. You can't have 1 or 2 individuals dominating and then not reaching a consensus, right? Or trying to overly persuade people to a certain decision, like what happened with the Challenger, for any number of reasons, versus an open dialogue, an open debate about what it should be. And then brainstorming is a technique used with groups to generate multiple ideas. So you could, there's dartboards, there's a bunch of different techniques you could use to brainstorm. Get a whiteboard and just start writing out ideas. just again, just kind of an open generation of innovative ways, thinking out of the box, just to come up with some ideas. So managers need to encourage that kind of situation and that kind of dialogue in groups. When you're brainstorming, defer judgment. There's going to be a lot of bad ideas along with a lot of good ideas. Don't judge until all the ideas are out there, because then people will stop contributing. Build on the ideas of others. Encourage wild ideas. Again, think out of the box. That's the beauty of groups making decisions. Go for quantity over quality. Same tactic when you're writing. Just when you start writing, just write. Quantity is way better than quality. Then go back and edit. When you brainstorm, go back, pick out the best ideas. Be visual. Whiteboards, post-it notes, diagram trees, anything you could do visually helps people. And just get the information out of your head onto something. And one conversation at a time. If everybody's talking at the same time, then it gets a bit overwhelming. Okay, so that's our last video on decision making. There's a lot in there. We talked about groups. There's certainly advantages to having groups making decisions, but also disadvantages. So as a manager, you have to kind of understand that. You have to be able to pick the right people for a group. You have to be able to nurture that group, make sure that group is functional, and if that's the case, then you're certainly going to have good decisions coming from that group.